Hi, I'm Griffin, and I'm a game master. I run high fantasy role-playing games on the weekends for my friends and family, set in worlds of my own imagination, filled with swords and sorcery. And I'm also a homemaking mom with 4 kids and a devout baptized Christian. And I realized I've learned quite a lot about God through the highly creative act of running these games. For the uninitiated, fantasy role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder function in a unique way compared to your normal board game choices for family game night. Let me give you a short primer that will set up my points for later. Tabletop role-playing games, or TTRPGs for short, require 3 specific things to function: the players, the system, and the game master. First, the system is a functional structure set that forms the backbone of the moving parts that take what could just be collaborative storytelling and turn it into a game to play. The system is what defines character creation, magic systems, rules of engagement in and out of combat, and other tools that all help determine failure and win conditions in a world that exists only in your mind. This is why you often see a lot of dice in games like this. Something has to decide whether or not your character can reasonably do the thing. Speaking of characters, that's what the players do. They use the agreed upon system of choice to create unique player characters, or PCs for short, who they take the role of during the game. Making decisions, interacting with the imagined world, all while looking through the eyes of a custom sentient being with skills and traits often wildly outside the capabilities of even the most broken video game characters. If your GM runs at a high enough level for you to get to show off their capabilities, that is. In other words, the players breathe life into a person who is little more than just a collection of statistics on a page. But every actor has to have their stage, don't they? And that's where the Game Master comes in. You see, not only is the Game Master the arbiter of the rules, but they are the fully fledged game designer whose job it is to conceptualize and describe the living, breathing world around the PCs and facilitate their every interaction with it, presenting and acting out each and every character, monster, and obstacle. They present story hooks, keep play flowing, and make sure every player gets to have some of the limelight. They are the omniscient narrator, the god of the game, if you will. Now, a few of you may be thinking, well, you said you're a Christian. I've heard about Dungeons and Dragons. And isn't the Dungeon Master a facilitator of witchcraft? How could you learn anything about God through such a thing? Well, the short answer is no, else I wouldn't be doing it. But the games I run do have high magic levels that tell stories in polytheistic cosmologies, which I know not every Christian is comfortable with. Not even on a basic storytelling level. But the reason why I do is outside the scope of this video. But even if you're the kind of Christian who's not comfortable with letting your kids watch Disney movies and things like that because of the magic, I still think you're going to get something out of this video if you watch till the end. Because what I have to say about God is about the structure of the game itself, not the content of it. It's about the roles and what God's shown me through these roles of system, player, and game master. To focus a little more on these roles and how they relate to my newfound ability to conceptualize broad theological concepts like sovereignty and free will, I need to explain the most important rule that applies to any and every system, and that's Rule 0. It's stated in a variety of ways by a variety of system handbooks, but it is essentially this. In the interest of serving the game and the playing experience, the GM has the ultimate authority of all rules and rule sets. They can tweak, add on to, or eliminate anything in the system that doesn't serve or mesh with their game. And the assumption is that they will do so with both clear communication and consistency to create the best possible story for all. While good GMs use this wisely and sparingly, the GM can technically do anything they want at any time. They have sovereign rule of the game. Now, with that in mind, let's talk about the Christian God. My God. The concept of the great I Am is disarmingly simple to state, but infinitely hard for human beings to fully comprehend in the context of the real world we experience every single day. Full of evil and suffering. He is, number one, all-powerful and all-knowing, and number two, always good at all times, loving and consistent without contradiction or failure. I fully believe in both of these concepts, but it would take hours to expound upon both of these in full. So I'm going to focus on the first, which is a statement of sovereignty, or full and complete control. God can do anything he wants at any time, and he can force people to do whatever, whenever, if so he chooses to do so. Proverbs 21:1 says, "The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. Like rivers of water, he turns it wherever he wishes." So what then is free will? Is it an illusion? Some Christians even believe in predestination, that God has already appointed some to his way and others to evil. And there really is no choice at all. And this is where picturing God as a game master is so useful. If God is sovereign and nothing is outside of his control, then why does evil flourish and abound? Well, because of free will. And for our purpose, let's call that player agency. Player agency is what distinguishes GMs from authors. The involvement of those who partake in the game, the simulated world, they give the game more meaning to those who would be game masters. And the same applies to God. As sophisticated of a system and simulation as God is capable of maintaining at all times, why not create automatons that act out perfectly written script? Isn't that what predestination suggests? He doesn't want playthings. He wants people. He wants players. People who actively partake in the system and world and use the bounty he provides in wise and productive ways that ultimately add flavor and nuance to the overall story, the campaign, that he wants to run. He wants relationship, but only with those who want that too. A good GM lets players interact with the setting in any way that they choose, with the system provided, but ask any GM, and I guarantee you they have a preference for particular playstyles, and playstyles they really don't want at their table. And a great GM provides both realistic and consistent consequences, both good and bad, for every actions a player takes, and uses or doesn't use the dice to facilitate those actions. So, when the rogue pickpockets the town guard for the 20th time, it's more than reasonable that a good GM would both allow the attempt and have the rogue most reasonably tossed in the brig if caught. That's just good gaming, running a world in alignment with its pre-established rules and rule sets, and well, after all, he did create the system itself. But wait, I hear you say, a player can quit the game at any time. If they don't like the world, the rules, the setting, the other players, or any reason at all, they can quit. People don't have that luxury. People don't even know that they are players in a game. And for those who don't subscribe to the concept of God at all, are still stuck in the game. How's that fair? And I see your point. Perhaps using the concepts of the player role versus the GM role puts a kink into the whole sovereignty concept. Because ultimately, if a GM wrests agency of a PC away from a player, that player absolutely can quit. And we, the Christian faith, all generally agree that God is completely sovereign. If God is the GM, then the people he created are like the PCs themselves. And those who consistently seek out God's will and use the system in a way that he intended to make good and wise decisions have the option to become players and co-GMs someday, We call that upgrade from the conceptual world built in the matrix of God's mind to the real world that God himself exists in, the kingdom of heaven, the ultimate win condition. Now, this disparity of dimension both clarifies the roles, but also the reason why those without faith almost never seem to encounter God, while those who believe encounter him every single day. Some call it confirmation bias, but the scriptures state both that without faith it is impossible to please him, and he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. And for as the heavens are up higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Unless the GM inserts himself into any PC's given narrative, how could free-willed person formed into a cosmology of God's very mind even know that they are in a matrix at all? Now, from here, the questions arise about God's goodness and his faithfulness, and ultimately if he is who he claims to be. But for most Christians, I think it's safe to assume that you fundamentally believe that if you follow Christ and his Father at all. And just like a good GM, he does not deus ex machina every single choice and die roll, and he allows the world to play out and react naturally to PC choice freely, as they will for good or for ill. And those who diligently seek him and show themselves to be the best candidates for GM status have the opportunity to upgrade when the time comes for the next leg of his divine campaign. And just as a GM may know their players well enough to predict what people will likely choose in a given circumstance, God takes this a step further by being able to read our hearts and our minds at any given moment. But he never violates free will completely, even when he turns the hearts of kings. He does at times subvert the natural physical aspects of his system and puts particular people on particular collision courses with others to serve his purpose and their PC's development. Let's call these miracles and trials. But he only does so in ways that are A, necessary to bring many sons to glory, and B, are completely in line with the moral system he set up in accordance with his overarching will for the greater narrative design of his will and completely aligned with his self-defined character. So, because of original sin, player choice in campaign number 2, video on that later, evil things are allowed to play out naturally, and they're not always stopped even when innocents are harmed, because above all else, free will cannot be overly subverted. The sandbox doesn't cease to be a sandbox just because there is a God, and the presence of God doesn't negate the simulated nature of the sandbox. Both things are true. But what keeps me so invested in my faith while knowing all this is remembering that a good GM, a great GM, is actively invested in their players and their characters' stories, and, if the player's actions permit it, take every opportunity to share the spotlight with them, and that his goal is to see as many PCs graduate to co-GM as possible. There's so much more to be said on this topic, so much more comparisons to be made between the roles of the GM and the role of a benevolent God. And I have a lot more to say, including how the role of Christ, going from the Word to Jesus, fits in, how I view the overall plan of God and the story of the Bible as a series of magnificently run campaigns. Subscribe if any of that interests you. And of course, I want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever considered these things before? Is there a gaping theological flaw I missed? Comment below. But until next time, stay gaming, stay praying.